Hey, Steve Mignonti here. It's late January 2024, and yeah, I'm still in the shop. And as you probably know, back in August, I got encephalitis, which is a swelling of the brain, which can be life-threatening. I was in a medically induced coma for 5 weeks, and believe it or not, on a liquid diet. So it cut my weight down, which is cool. I'm down at 175 when I was on the peak of the liquid diet. But now I'm on the road to recovery, and I want to thank all of our viewers for staying in, keeping the faith, and also Rick DeBrule and Tyler Hoover and Mike Joy for pitching in with videos as we went forward. Okay, so speaking of vehicles and rare, cool things, I'm a fan for car models, right? And this is a show I had on Motor Trend. It was called Steve Mignonti Supermodels, and this is a picture of me 20 years ago. So I had black hair back then. But anyway, when model cars are discussed, you always have to talk about JoHan. And people might wonder, what is JoHan? Is that Johann Sebastian Bach? No, nothing to do with musicians or classical music at all. JoHan was John Hanley. He was the fellow who actually founded JoHan in 1947, one of the first plastic model car manufacturers in the United States, followed by AMT, which actually came after. AMT stood for Aluminum Model Toys. But with that said, AMT and JoHan and Revell and Monogram and Hawk and Lindbergh and IMC were all duking it out in the model car market, because as the baby boomers turned 10, 11, 12, whatever, they started building model cars. And it was a multi-million-dollar, maybe a billion-dollar business. It was huge from like 1959 to about 1972, 73. And one of the big things back then, if you were a kid, the Auto World catalog was your friend. This came out of Scranton, Pennsylvania. This is the 1968 and a half model cars, and this is all the new releases from every manufacturer of note. And let's take a quick peek at this, actually. Now, 1968 and a half tells us that Auto World was so busy they would actually release 2 or 3 catalogs per year. And here's a model building contest they had right here, and model car lettering from Auto World. And actually, Auto World had its own, department for making lettering and decals and stuff. But getting further into this here, this truly was like a candy store for a kid. And that's Oscar Kowaleski right there, the founder of Auto World. And I believe he's deceased, but he was the founder of the Auto World catalog. And as we go forward here, here's AMT 125th scale models, again, aluminum model toys. And AMT pretty much ruled the roost in the 60s. They were the most popular. They had the most diverse variety of model kits to choose from. And they have custom kits, drag cars, and even stock vehicles, Lincoln Continental, Ford Falcon. And a lot of these kits have been re-released and were never actually scrapped. So you can still get them. Don't pay too much for them. These have all been released in the last couple of years right here. It's pretty cool. But again, 1968 and a half, these things were the biggest, baddest, coolest models. This is Monogram right here on this side. Oh, sorry, AMT. Yeah, AMT, the Don Dartle's dragster, and of course the double Allison engine. And basically cool models, but little kids would pick up this catalog right here and ask mom or dad to send off a money order or a bag of coins to Auto World in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And about 5 weeks later, a box would show up. This is long before Amazon, or even next day air. But this is JoHan right here. This is the beginning of the best stuff right here. JoHan, John Hanley, and the by JoHan. And here's like the Olds 442 flip-top funny car. And something that never existed in real life, nor did this. This is the Javelin SST. There was an AMX flip-top funny car back then. And this here's the Stripper, a fictitious 65 Plymouth funny car. But again, what JoHan would do is take an existing promo model body and then repurpose it with decals and other things, as we'll see in a few minutes, and basically create a whole new market. Now, if you look right here, Holland Hurst, that thing right there was new in 68, 2 Hemi engines, one of them in the back, one up front, and just a beautiful model. The only thing is, this never existed in real life. The Holland Hurst wasn't a real thing. You would say, well, it was like the Hurst Harry Olds, right? That had 2 engines, did burnouts all quarter mile. Well, the Holland Hurst was a fictitious thing, basically a way for JoHan to utilize tooling for this. This is the Cadillac Hurst model, which was a fantastic model. 10 inches long. It actually had to fit inside this extra long box. But here we have it, this sense of humor, Digby. Get it, Digby. I guess that's the funeral parlor. And then on the other side of the box, we have here the ambulance, which was a spin-off of that. And so JoHan really was the small player of the big 5, I guess you might say. There was Lindbergh and IMC, which were important, but not as important as JoHan. And today, collectors will pay hundreds of dollars for these things. And here's this is a sales brochure right here. This is something that model kit dealers would have had in their Rolodex And this is the Holland Hurst funny car right there. It says four-wheel drive powered by 2 injected Hemi engines. And GC800 is the Gold Cup series. $2 was suggested retail. And Gold Cup was this chrome-plated Gold Cup right here, which was included in all Gold Cup models. Anyway, we have the stock versions of the ambulance and the hearse. But getting back to the ambulance, JoHan took, and they wrung the sponge another time. They took the tooling for the Holland Hurst and whipped up the Roaring Rambulance, which was the same basic idea, but with a different body, and I'll show that to you in a second. And on the box art on these things, I started to drool when I was a kid. Hillborn injection, the way the colors were played with, orange and yellow right here, very, very op art, meant to catch a kid's eye. Hurst wheels, and then inside, the bummer is this, for the most part, these things were molded in white plastic, whereas most monogram models were molded in color, which a lot of kids didn't like because they had to paint the model. You couldn't really do it without them painting the model. But the way that they changed up the ambulance model, here's the windows on it, and the Holland Hurst was a hearse, of course. It had blocked off body parts right here. And speaking of that, let's open up the Holland Hurst. And these are both very much identical kits, with the exception of the body and the decals. And here we have it here. This is the Holland Hurst with the Hurst body and no windows versus the Rambulance with windows. There we go. How messy is this? Fumble, fumble. But yeah, so the beauty of this thing really is that you have 2 Hemi engines to choose from. And the beauty is that they have excellent Hillborn fuel injection. And JoHan had the best Hemi in the business. These are the valve covers for the K-head right here with the flat ends, spark plug holes, and the Hillborn 8 stacks right there. And the Hillborn manifold. Just beautiful stuff. When I was a kid, I'd buy these things up at swap meets and stuff and cut the engines apart and take the Hillborn stacks and cannibalize them for other model cars. I kind of feel guilty about it now, but not so much. So here's the Holland Hurst, the Roaring Rambulance. And these things are 1/25th scale models, whereas monogram was mostly about 1/24th scale, a little bit bigger. Problem with that was you couldn't mix parts from one kit to the next. But here are the decals for the Holland Hurst right here. Pretty cool stuff. Hemi powered, the blue lettering right there. And Holland Hurst, just really cool. Here's a B&M Hydro Shift decal right there, an M&H. And Dave Digby was the driver of the fictitious driver of the Holland Hurst. And the decals, or the instruction sheets, just beautiful. Look at that art. Isn't that cool? It's like this, almost a charcoal drawing of the model itself. Really cool. And here's the Gold Cup, that thing right there. It's about 1.5 inches, 2 inches long. And they're usually missing when you find them because kids like to take them out and bring them to the car show and whatever. But here's the assembly instructions on it, and it's very educational. And the Hemi engine up top there at the individual injector stacks, 8 of them times 2 engines is 16 stacks, which is plenty for 2 funny car models or just to use as a stock model. Now, I've never built a Holland Hurst out of the box because why? And I'd rather do a Plymouth or Dodge funny car and use the Hillborn stuff on that. A lot of the early JoHan kits is that they call them the flat boxes because they have a really big top and not much depth. That was all about retail space and packaging and utilizing as much space as possible. But the only thing is, it also led to a problem with other model car kits that had a smaller box, like a shoebox. So JoHan remedied the situation with a second version of the Holland Hurst, this thing right here. Same model all the way around, same decals, same everything, same twin Hemis. But the weird thing is, if you look at this, that little spot right there would say molded in competition yellow or nothing when it was not molded in competition yellow, which would trigger false advertising claims. Now this is a faded one. This actually is the yellow that they sold as the JoHan Holland Hurst. But again, I bought this thing on eBay, stripped off the paint with some oven cleaner, and it's kind of ready for resurrection. Not that I'm going to do anything with it, but basically it shows you how detailed the model was. Here's the engines and all the little bits and pieces inside of there. And pretty finicky stuff for an 8-year-old kid. If you were like, anybody under 15 would have a hell of a time building this thing well, because it's finicky. And with that said, it's better to overdo it than to underdo it. And JoHan was never one to underdo anything, except for the fact that I don't think their marketing was all that good. They didn't have magazine ads in Boys Life or anything like that. So they kind of had to do their retailing at the store level, which meant flyers like this thing right here to tell the world about the latest JoHan kits. The dealer would come out with these things, put them on the shelf and on the checkout counter, and then people would, and here's the Roaring Rambulance. And it's funny how it's the same basic model, but with some differences. The lights on the roof, and the Hemis are the same inside, and just great stuff. These JoHan model kits and the brochures are great stuff. Here's right here the 1970 new models, which tells us the fact that JoHan also get into just replications of stock muscle cars. Here's the Hornet, the GTX Plymouth 1970, the Javelin the 70, Cadillac Coupe de Ville, and of course the Eldorado, a fantastic model, Olds 442, Ford Maverick, and an AMX two-seater. So again, these models right here generally are between $50 and $450, depending on which one you're dealing with, and if it's all there, and if the box is in good shape. So that's the story of how JoHan tried to bury the competition with a hearse and an ambulance model, and succeeded to some degree, but at this point in time, 2024, these have not been re-released because the word is that John Hanley was a shrewd businessman, and apparently eventually toward the end of the run, around 1985 or so, the employees started to get so mad they weren't getting paid, they would scrap the beryllium tooling that led to these models, so they won't be re-released ever, with one exception. It's conceivable that if somebody wanted to 3D print, find a mint kit, one of these things right here, and just scan it, and then use that to cut out some molds to start squirting plastic again. It's conceivable that could be done. And with these things, this thing right here, what did I pay for this? $478. No kidding, that's on eBay. $478. I bought this thing. This is when things were good. I could do things like that and not feel guilty. But again, it's a great prop, and why not? The closest thing we're going to get to a reproduction is this right here, Johnny Lightning, courtesy of Tom Lowe and the folks at Auto World Round 2. And of course, Tom Lowe took Auto World, the copyright and all that stuff, and he was running with it. And also the JoHan stuff, the classic plastic series of 1/64th die-cast metal cars, brings back the idea of the Holland Hurst, but I just wish that Tom Lowe and the folks at Round 2 / Johnny Lightning would actually squirt some plastic into these molds instead of die-cast metal. But that's the story of the Holland Hurst. This is the one that brings you home from the hospital, and this is the one that takes you to the graveyard. Hope you enjoy the video. Stick around, we'll be back with more.